This happened to me when I was 11 and I was staying at a friend's house who I will call Kit. Kit was one of those cool kids in school who was always up to trouble. Looking back, I don't understand how I managed to remain friends with him for so long, as I was anything but cool and never did anything he did. One night I was staying over at his place on a Friday after school, and we started playing touch footy in the backyard, one-on-one. After playing for about 20 minutes, he asks if I heard of a game called Mop, which I did not. He explained to me the way the game works is you hide by the road, and when someone walks or drives past, shout the word Mop, hoping to get some kind of reaction. I suppose the game can be known by any other name, but in my case, he called it Mop. I agreed, so we went down to his front yard and looked up and down the road to see if anyone was heading our way. I should note that Kit's house isn't actually on a main road, so the only reason you would drive down past on the left is if you had a house further down or had to turn around at an intersection street. About 20 houses past Kit's is bush, so I wasn't expecting many people to pass by. I hid behind the garbage bins, which stand by the driveway fence, and Kit was hiding in the garden. At this point, it was about 4 PM, so it was still light out, which to me made the game sound less fun. About 2 minutes in, a car drives by and Kit shouts out Mop. Nothing happened, which was no surprise. I knew someone driving by wouldn't be able to hear us. Not long after, a man and woman were walking their dog, and as they were about to walk out of my sight, Kit shouts out Mop. The man and the woman stopped and looked around confused for about 5 seconds. Then they started walking again. That was the exact reaction I was expecting. After about 10 more disappointing reactions, I was starting to get bored, but Kit was just having too much fun. Eventually, I noticed a homeless looking man making his way over. Kit couldn't have seen him yet, so I gave him a signal that someone was near and he waited. As the man was getting closer, I could see that he was talking to himself like he was arguing with someone. As he got closer, I could see that he was at least in his 40s. I could see how dirty he looked. He had long greasy black hair and his face was covered in dirt. I was starting to get nervous. When the man was going past my sight, I heard Kit shout out something I was not expecting. He shouts, "Dickhead!" The man looked right towards the house in an instant, looking absolutely furious. I was freaking out as the man could have easily spotted me hiding behind the bins. The man started passing back and forth with his eyes fixed on the house, looking, muttering to himself. Eventually he started walking back the way he was heading, and once he was out of my view, I got out from behind the bins and made my way over to Kit. I was about to open my mouth and tell him how stupid he was when he said, "Let's follow him." I told him that was a terrible idea, but as a stupid 11-year-old kid, I agreed. We kept doing it at a distance and followed the man off the road and at the entrance to the bush. We hid behind a car and watched the man as he went into the bush. I wish I could say we headed back right then, but Kit wanted to see where he was going. So we followed. Kit went in first and I followed close behind. I was walking as quietly as possible, but the leaves were all dry, so they crunched really loudly as I walked over them. About 5 minutes into me following Kit, he stopped dead in his tracks, and I heard him mutter to himself, "Oh fuck." I walked next to him, and just ahead, behind some rocks, there was the man crouched, looking right at us. I didn't have time to react as the man stood up and sprinted towards us, shouting like a madman. Kit and I turned and ran, screaming. I could just sense the man's presence, closing in on me, and I was fearing that any second he would grab me and that would be the end of me. Lucky for me, the man tripped and fell. I remember just feeling the air move under the man's body just inches behind me. I was easily in arm's reach of him. Hearing the man fall, I slowed down and looked back and saw him lying flat on his stomach, and he let out an angry growl. I turned and continued running. I couldn't see Kit at that point, but I could hear the crunching of leaves and branches, so I knew he was close. Eventually, I got out of the bush and started running on the road back to the house. When I got there, Kit was already there, out of breath, sweating. I started to cry due to the fear that I could have been murdered. I never spoke of this story to anyone, and Kit apparently hasn't either. I haven't been to Kit's house since. My deepest apologies to that man who my friend and I mistreated.
This happened in either December 2019 or January 2020. I was standing outside in the dark, at the end of the driveway, taking a much-needed breath of fresh air. I saw 3 hooded figures walking past the corner, which I lived 2 houses away from. There was a man wearing a black hoodie, a girl wearing a white hoodie, and a little kid wearing a red hoodie. Once I seen them, I immediately thought that was something really wrong. I immediately ducked behind the car, just in time. They stopped shortly after and continued walking past my street. A few seconds after, they went out of my sight. I got out from behind the car and stayed there for another second. I thought it was strange, but I thought it was the last time I would ever see them. I was wrong. Shortly after, couldn't have been more than a minute later, they came back. I immediately ducked behind the car, but it was too late. My stomach was flipping and my heart was pounding. It's important to note that my neighbor's car was parked in the driveway, and before that was the ditch, then the corner. Sorry if I confused you. I saw them ducking down and creeping towards me. I immediately realized they were sneaking up on me, and needed to get out of there. I ran to the only working door at the time, which was in the backyard. I got back in and told my mom, and I looked at the front door, and saw all 3 of them looking for me, in front of my house. I looked a minute later and all 3 of them were standing in front of my house. I've had other traumatic stuff happen, like my ex-family stalker who possibly came over at night and tried to invite himself in, who has mental health issues. So let me know if you want to hear about that. I'm traumatized. So much scary stuff has happened to me these last 2 years. So if you want any more, let me know.
One evening, about 5 years ago, I traveled to Loch Ness with a friend to see the loch and the surrounding area. We had planned on arriving by afternoon, spend the evening, then head to the hotel when it got dark. That was perfect. We got there with no problems and spent the day together, taking in the beautiful landscape. The moon began to rise, and then we decided it was time to head back, as we had spent the majority there. As my friend began to drive back, she went around a sharp bend, and I mean the word to its very meaning. She narrowly avoided a man standing on the edge. She was quite understandably in shock and slammed the brakes in sheer panic. She began to pant, verging on hyperventilation, as I tried to calm her. She had believed she hit the man when she swerved. The man was okay, as we later learned, because he walked towards the car and apologized for standing so near to the road. After he tried to make small talk with repeated apologies, he showed me 2 pictures and asked if I knew who the people were, because he is trying to track them down. It was dark, so I switched the light on and quickly glanced, then said I didn't. I showed my friend and she just shook her head without properly looking. She was still in shock. The man didn't ask for the photos back, nor did that conversation go any further. He apologized again and wished us a good night. Without realizing, I joked that we would be better back at the hotel. He laughed and walked off. We drove on. When we were in the hotel room, I looked at the 2 pictures more attentively and felt sick to the pit of my stomach. One picture was of me and my friend standing at the water's edge, overlooking the loch, with my arm wrapped around her. The picture had been taken from behind. The second picture was of me and my friend walking together, our faces clearly seen. That picture was taken from the side, but it must have been done in a wooded area because you could see tree branches. We both sat for about an hour with the pictures in our fingertips facing us, speechless. I tried to remember the man, but I couldn't remember any features because of the darkness besides a beard, glasses, and that he was soft-spoken. Later that night, I was awoken by my friend who was screaming frantically. When I ran into the room, she said that a man with glasses was watching her through the window. We packed up and left. I've never been back to Loch Ness since.
I was on a date in Camden with a girl who, from photos, I wasn't overly excited about, but in the flesh, made my eyebrows shoot off my head. She was really pretty and smart and funny, and we had quite a few cocktails in. I think it was the Blues Kitchen before going to the gay bar in Camden, which has since closed down. I think it was called the Black Cap. The date is going well, and we meet these people who join our table, and the guy tells me at the bar that my date said she wanted me to kiss her. I did, and it turned out that the guy was just helping us out by moving things along. My date was really shocked and told me that I was bold, but she liked it. She came back to my hotel room with me, which was a 10-minute walk away. The room was kind of small, but cool and space-age in style. We were both drunk and made out a lot. Then, she started crying about problems that she was having with a friend who was really sick and that her job was really stressful. She went full on sobbing. She left in embarrassment even though I was worried about her leaving like that, but she said she would be okay. As she left, I saw a large man in a black thick leather jacket in the corridor. He was staring at my date as she left and then stared at me as I closed the door. I was pretty wasted, so after checking my date got on a bus, I had a nap and was woken up by banging on the door. I ignored it, but then it kept going, so I got up and staggered to the door and opened it a crack. I recognized the leather elbow and arm as the door was shoved open violently. I was drunk, and the jolt of the door caused me to fall over. Luckily, the room entrance was so small and around the width of the door, so my back was against the wall by the door while my feet touched the other wall. My body kept the door closed as this man kept shoving against the door. I managed to get it closed again, locked it, and went to sleep as I was still drunk. When I woke up in the morning, I thought I had dreamt the man and the door, but when I looked down at the side of my ribs, hips, and thigh, I had dark bruises. I was really lucky, and I'm so glad that room was tight on space, because if it hadn't been, that guy would have got in pretty easily. So, creepy leather-clad who tried to break into my hotel room? Let's not meet.
Back when I was 18 years old, I started working at a gas station. This was my first job. Near the end of my first shift, I was cleaning the hot dog rollers and a man walked in. He was rough looking, not in a bad way, but like he had been working outside all day. As soon as I set eyes on him, I got the gut feeling that I needed to stay away from him. Since I wasn't the one at the register, there was no reason for him to talk to me. However, the moment he saw me, he walked over and asked if I was new. I said yes, and he told me I was doing a good job and went on his way to check out. I noticed that he had a Jamaican accent, which was weird to hear since I lived in Michigan. Honestly, at that point, I thought my gut was wrong about him, and that I probably felt that way because I have bad social anxiety and had reached my limit of human interaction for the day. I was right the first time. During my next shift, he once again came in, and again I was cleaning. He came over to me and I still got that bad feeling in my gut. He asked me how my day was, and I told him that it was okay. Then he looked at my hand. I was wearing my high school class ring, and I had to put it on my left hand ring finger because I didn't want to scuff it up while cleaning with my right hand. He asked if I was married. I told him no and told him it was my class ring. He then asked me if I was dating, and I lied and I said yes. He started asking me questions about my boyfriend, like how old he was, did I want to marry him, and if we were in a physical relationship. I told him I wasn't comfortable with answering that, and he got mad, but dropped the conversation. He would continue to ask me questions about my love life every time he would come in. About a month and a half of this, I noticed that he would come in every day that I was working. This was weird because the days and hours that I worked changed from week to week. I asked my coworkers if he came in when I wasn't here, and all of them said no. I also asked if any of them had told him what shifts I'd been working, but again, they said no. This honestly freaked me out, and I would start to have a panic attack every time that I would see his car pull in. One day he tried to give me his phone number, and I politely told him that I wasn't interested in it. He got mad and was telling me that I needed to take it. My coworker at this point told him that he needed to leave. The next day he came in and asked me on a date, and when I declined, he told me that I was going to regret it. He asked me several more times, and each time I said no. After a while of him asking, I told him that it was never going to happen, and that I had absolutely no interest in him and never would. This only made things worse. He told me that I didn't have a choice and that he would be here when I got off work, and that I was going to go with him. When he left, I called my father, told him what had happened, and asked if Mom and he could pick me up at the end of my shift. He said yes. I didn't get off until midnight, and about 10 minutes before my dad walked in and told me to act like I was going to my car as normal, but he was going to be in there. A few minutes after, the guy pulled in and got out of his car and was just standing there. As my shift was over, I hurriedly walked to my car. He started approaching me, and I jumped into the passenger seat and slammed the door shut. When he got to my door, my dad rolled down the window and pointed his gun at him. The man ran off, and I thought that this was the end of it since he didn't come back into work for the next few days. However, it wasn't. About a week later, I was at the store with my mom when I got the feeling that someone was following us, and sure enough, it was him. We got out of there as fast as we could, and from then on, my mom and I was not allowed to leave the house without my dad. Everywhere I would go, he would show up. Even when I went to my friend's house, who had lived about a half hour from me, we caught him driving by the house several times. My mother also caught him following her several times, which freaked her out. We contacted the police and told them what was going on, but they said that there wasn't enough evidence and there was nothing they would be able to do. To this day, I'm still mad at the police for not doing anything. He started coming back into my workplace, and I asked my boss to ban him from the store, but she said no. Later, I'd find out that they were friends, and that's how he always knew when I was working. I also believe that she was the one to give him my phone number, because it was around this time that I started receiving strange messages about how I looked, about my parents, and other creepy things. I got to the point where I was so paranoid that I wouldn't leave my house without my father, and when he was at work, I would carry a gun around with me. I had to have him drop me off and pick me up from work. And when I was at work, anytime I had seen a car that even somewhat looked like his, I would run and hide in the back room. Even my poor mother was paranoid and wouldn't go outside without someone with her. Finally, my father had enough and told me to quit my job and that he would help me pay the few bills that I had. Even after quitting my job, I was freaked out and decided to go stay with my aunt and uncle, who was a police officer, who lived about 6 hours away from me. When I got there was the first time in nearly 6 months that I was able to relax. It didn't last for long. One night my uncle and I went to pick up a pizza. Less than a minute after he walked in, the glass on my door was broken and hands were grabbing me. It was the Jamaican man and another guy. They got the door open and were pulling me out. I fought them as hard as I could. I got a few good hits on them, but it didn't do much good. Thankfully, my uncle came out. Both of them ran after my uncle and announced who he was. But my uncle chased down the Jamaican man after I shouted which man he was. That day he was arrested. I cried for hours straight from relief, anger, and stress. Later on, I found out that he was here illegally and was deported. It took me about 2 years before I would go anywhere by myself. Honestly, it wasn't until I got my CPL that I was comfortable going places without someone with me. I still get panic attacks from time to time because of seeing a car like his, or if I feel like someone is watching me. So Jamaican man, if you're reading this, let's not meet again.
So basically, me and my friend were messing around until he informed me about a part of the web so messed up and dangerous it's illegal. I kinda thought he was bluffing, but asked to see this part of the web. I don't remember how he got there, but somehow he did because he said he went there for laughs and gags before. When we got there, everything seemed normal until we started to see things with titles like military-grade lasers or military-grade integral suppressors. As we got further in, we started seeing more things like drugs and of course more illegal weapons, until we finally just quickly scrolled through stuff since we didn't see anything that piqued our interest, until we came across a website or something titled Daycare for Kids. When we clicked on it, we saw what looked to be a room covered in feces and blood, with a caged mic in the middle. We got so scared that we closed out the browsers as fast as possible and never went back.
This happened to me during my junior year of college. For context, I'm a 22-year-old female, and I was driving from my hometown in the Chicago suburbs to the University of Missouri, which is about a 6-hour drive. I made the drive about every 4 to 6 weeks to see my family and my long-distance boyfriend. There are 2 main ways to take the town my university is in: stay on the interstate system through central Illinois and St. Louis, or branch out to the back roads after Springfield, Illinois, until picking up the interstate, back about 30 minutes from my college. I usually took the back roads, simply because it kept me awake with the constant speed limit changes and the occasional towns, but this particular time, I took the interstate system, because there was a high potential for winter weather. I was minding my own business, listening to one true crime podcast episode after another, when about an hour from my exit, traffic came to a standstill. Great, I thought. It was already way beyond dark at that point. Also, it was Sunday night, and I just wanted to get home and catch a decent night's sleep before Monday classes. After a while, emergency vehicles flew past the traffic on the shoulder, indicating there must be an accident up ahead. After what felt like forever, traffic slowly started crawling again, and eventually started moving a little, as we all passed the accident. This is when it started. I will admit, I like to drive fast on the interstate, especially on this particular drive. What college kid doesn't? I was in the right lane, with a decent amount of space between me and the car in front of me, and that's when I noticed someone right on my bumper. Seriously? I muttered aloud. Traffic was no longer super heavy, and the person could easily pass me in the left lane. Suddenly, the car began flashing their brights at me and honking. I was extremely confused. I turned off my podcast and kept a close eye on my rear view. The person continued to flash their brights, half blinding me in the darkness through my mirrors. "Asshole," I said, flooring it into the left lane. I maneuvered in and out of the cars, attempting to get away from whatever issue this person had. Except they followed my every move. Being a 21-year-old female, I began to get a sick feeling in my stomach. I had listened to enough true crime and general horror stories to be just the right amount of paranoid. I had read on social media recently about girls from my school encountering sex traffickers in my town and along the interstate that runs through it. One of the town's papers had even ran a series of stories regarding multiple sex and human trafficking rings that use the interstate to traffic victims because it basically runs the length of the entire country. I took that disturbing thought out of my head and continued doing about 85 miles an hour in the right lane unless I had to go around someone. The car continued to follow me, flashing its lights and barely letting themselves ever get more than a few cars behind or beside me. I finally took the exit to my university. I looked back and the car had followed. It seemed as though this person was trying to get me to pull over. Is there something wrong with my car that I can't see? I wondered silently. Even if there was, there's no way in hell I'm pulling over on the side of the interstate in the middle of a dark, rainy night. That is exactly how urban legends or teenage slasher films start. At this point, I had no idea what to do. Looking back, I really should have driven straight to the local police station, but I was too flustered and too scared to think straight. I tried to think back on the last hour or so of my drive. Did I cut anyone off? I didn't think so. I didn't think I had done anything to make drivers around me this pissed. I'm a relatively good driver and I tend to mind my own business on the road, not engaging in road rage or anything stupid like that. I stupidly began driving to my apartment. The car continued to follow, still flashing its lights every so often, but no longer honking. They continued to stay glued to my bumper. I began to panic. What if they followed me all the way home? What the hell should I do? Call the police and send them on some wild goose chase to look for me and this car as I'm driving around town? As I approached another small exit off the local highway onto a smaller street that ran past campus and towards my apartment, I had an idea. As I got closer to the exit, I did not get into the far right lane to turn off. At the very last second, I jerked the wheel and careened across the gravel shoulder, so close to the grass I barely missed driving off the road. As I gunned it down the exit ramp, I glanced up at the overpass. The car had screeched to a halt and was honking its horn maniacally. I cried the rest of the way home, calling my boyfriend and explaining what had just happened. I never got a good enough look at the car to get the license plate or even really a good description of the vehicle, so I never reported the incident to the police. To this day, I have no idea what happened that night. My best guess is that whoever that person was, they saw me when we were all stopped on the interstate, waiting for the emergency vehicles to clear the scene. It's very clear from the stickers I have on my car, one of my university's names, and one that said Dog Mum, that I was likely a college-aged female. All this person had to do was end up next to me, see that I'm a female driving alone on the interstate in the middle of the night, and have just the wrong intentions.